I'm here is now for something different. That my task is to try to convey how Beijing viewed the election results and the implications for cross-strait relations. The three summary statements that I'll begin with and leave you with. One is disappointed but not surprised. That I think this was pretty well anticipated, not the magnitude of the KMT's defeat, but that Ma and the KMT were in trouble. Second is probably more troubled by the fact of the elections than the outcome of the election. The fact that they took place, how they took place, and the issues that decided the issue, that decided the outcome of the election. I'll come back to each of these. And finally, the characterization of the elections, both before and after, has a clear instrumental, happy spin character, but I think it's also quite accurate, particularly with reference to the unimportance of these elections for the things that Beijing cares about for the cross-straits. Let me go through these very, very briefly, beginning with what I would characterize as Beijing's approach, or even the strategy or the line that began to be developed before the elections and has continued in the very few things that I've seen said or written since. Clearly, Beijing has learned from previous elections, and it pretty much avoided the ham-fisted, heavy-handed attempts to influence the outcome of the election. So they got it. That a condemnation from Beijing was an endorsement for many voters, and criticism from Beijing, or approval from Beijing, was a kiss of death for them. So this let the folks in Taiwan have their election and stayed back from it. They've anticipated for my interaction at least a year that the next presidential election may well go to the DPP, and have moved away from the absolute unmitigated unacceptability characterization of the DPP, and reaching out to individual members of the DPP. We can deal with these people. We can talk to them. We're not yet ready to deal with the party as an organization or an institution, but it's preparing to continue cross-strait bridge building, strengthening a relationship, regardless of who wins in 2016. Part of the strategy that I believe Beijing adopted in here was to downplay the significance of the elections and the outcome for cross-straits. This was not depicted as a referendum on Ma's cross-strait policy. Presented by Beijing, this is about a lot of local issues, local candidates, that not a national referendum on an unpopular president and an unpopular party. They were aided in this strategy by the DPP. And I defer to others here how much of it was Tsai Ing-wen and how much of it was a larger set, but the decision to kick down the road, having a DPP position on cross-strait issues. A conscious decision to defer that electoral plan, if you will, until after the local election. That if the KMT didn't get it on the three fundamentals, she did. It's not make this about cross-strait relations. The judgment that on the basis of local concerns, public concerns, public dissatisfaction with KMT performance, DPP could do very well. You throw cross-straits into the mix, You alienate the base or you alienate the independent voters. So it was a very shrewd decision. At a minimum, this is a tacit bargain between the DPP and Beijing. Whether there was anything more explicit, I have no idea. Before the election, and certainly after, Beijing has depicted this repudiation of Ma Ying-jeou's leadership, local leadership, as the leader of Taiwan, failing to deliver public dissatisfaction. Before and after the election, Beijing commentaries have insisted that the elections were not a referendum, and the majority of people on both sides of the strait continue to support progress in cross-strait relations. It's sort of a, we're not going to make a big deal about this, you shouldn't make a big deal about this, separate issue. For domestic audiences on the mainland, the emphasis has been on the divisive character of elections, that the adoption of Western-style democracy and elections has shattered the unity of the people of Taiwan, that the sharp division of the vote, not an overwhelming majority for one party or another, this is sort of interfering with unity. The implicit, this could threaten the kind of law here. And the even more implicit, don't you realize how lucky you are here on the mainland that you have that divisive problem? An element is a little maybe more sophisticated or more acute here, is to imply that Taiwan has lost some of its luster as an Asian tiger, its economic performance, coinciding with its adoption of Western-style democracy. The implication is democracy is not so good for the economy. KMT is going to get creamed in this election because of poor economic performance, dissatisfaction with it. I think it's factually a big stretch, but that's the way at least some of the commentary is depicted. There's an effort to accentuate the positive in this. Treating the DPP as a legitimate political actor. That's different from previous elections. It was not a good and evil, not true patriots and separatists. More straightforward factual identification of who belonged to what party. I said at least the tacit character of the deal here of not making cross-straits an issue in the campaign. I think it would have been a mistake to have tried to make it an issue because I think all the polling and so forth was right. It's about other issues. That I think it's likely to produce a reaction in Beijing, maybe already has, that begins to, from the premise that the voters of Taiwan, the people of Taiwan, have not gotten enough out of the cross-strait relationship. The political benefits, the economic, the investment, the better understanding, but the trickle down isn't happening. That the sense that the economy maybe has suffered because of the focus on cross-strait seems to be a lesson or a conclusion being made. I just point to one data point that's consistent but not proof. The care with which Beijing took after the signing of the free trade agreement with South Korea, and to point out to Taiwan that these provisions that could easily be interpreted as discriminatory against Taiwan because it doesn't have the free trade agreement, They kick in very gradually. It's going to take a long time. So the implication is we can put in place more of the ECFA subordinate clauses and arrangements on this, and you'll not be disadvantaged. Beijing's eyes are on 2016. Who is mayor and city council and so forth? For Beijing's interest, it doesn't matter very much. Whether or not there can be improvements in the economy that maybe can be attributed to the cross-Strait relationship, how it reacts toward the outcome of the election, towards the candidates that emerge, seen as being more important to them for their issues. I'll conclude with some of the downsides for what I think are troubling issues for Beijing. One is, in contrast to Hong Kong, where they've gone out of their way to blame the black hand of the United States for spinning up the demonstrators, and it's pretty hard to blame the United States for the KMT loss. That if anything, the image was KMT, mind Joe, that's the American guy. Reduced tensions across the strait, reduced the security problems for the United States. So there's been nothing on that to explain outside interference. The concerns, the reason I say we're more troubled by the fact of the elections. Then you got Chinese people voting in elections. More than 11,000 elections. That clearly democracy is not ill-suited for all people who happen to speak Chinese on this. But the issues being local, bad food, slowing economy, inequality, element of corruption, these resonate with problems on the mainland. That any kind of give the people an opportunity to voice their opinion, the Communist Party is pretty vulnerable on these issues. The idea that the incumbent party could be thrown out, the incumbent leader can be as discredited as 9.7% approval rating suggests, I think reinforces the notion that the National People's Congress made the right decision on elections in Hong Kong. That having to vet the candidates because you didn't want to take a chance on where this might go and how critical of policy performance personalities voters might be. Final point, what I think troubles Beijing more than the elections and the outcome of the elections are the polls that were taken kind of along with who's up, who's down in the electoral races in the aftermath of the sunflower demonstrations. And they're referred to. These show very, very large majority that is disinterested in reunification in any kind of a short time frame. And in that 20 to 29 age category, it's in excess of 80% that when interprets it as continuing the status quo. It's certainly not an endorsement of moving toward reunification. So for Beijing, the challenge is how can they sustain the better cross-strait relations, the greater stability, the contacts, and all of that, while avoiding a renewed drift toward independence here. And that requires being smarter than they've been in the past, less clumsy than in the past, but at least the initial indicators are that they get it, and they recognize that that's a challenge. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.